We made it back to Dave's shop for the third video in this series of wood turning. And so Dave is going to be turning a bowl for us today using some of the techniques that we learned in the previous two videos of mounting a piece of wood and the different types of turning tools that are used in this craft. Dave's going to walk us through it today. Let's see what he has for us.
Hi, my name is Dave Dreacher, and we're going to do a short video on turning a bowl. This is intended for those of you who have never done this before, and we hope that we will be able to explain this in a way that will be helpful to you. We're going to start by attaching the wood to the chuck on the lathe. We're going to do it using what is known as a wormwood screw. And in order to do that, I have to drill a hole at the center point, which is slightly smaller than the screw. And I'll do that right now. It's not a critical thing, it's just that it's got to be tight when you put it. I think that's about long enough. This, by the way, is a piece of box elder or Manitoba maple, as sometimes referred to. And I'm going to put the wormwood screw in the chuck, tighten it up, and then I'm going to thread the wood onto it. This sits inside a recess in there so that it is automatically positioned, and it's a good solid way of fastening your work. So I'm going to turn it on, and it will. I can lock this spindle here so that I can use both hands. And what I'm doing here, the part that we're fastening to the lathe is the top of the bowl, and we're going to fashion the bottom of the bowl first. And the reason for that is we want to turn a tendon on here so we can turn it around and put it in the lathe and finish the bowl that way. So I'll take it off the lock. I've got a variable speed along with a forward and reverse, and I have to get some power here. I can vary the speed to whatever speed I wish, and I can reverse it if I want to later on when I'm doing sanding or whatever. I'm going to start off by let me just position the tool rest first, by just trimming the circumference so that we have a nice round piece of wood. I'm using a scraper. You could use a bowl gouge if you want to. It's a little bumpy because it's not quite round. Just takes a few passes and it will be. I can also use a gouge and take it off the same way, maybe a little easier. And when it is round, it'll smooth right out, and you'll notice that. This is almost round at this point. I'm just going to finish it off with a scraper, and then we can start working on the bottom of the bowl. Now, one thing I just want to show you is if you had a large block of wood and you didn't want to depend on just the worm screw, you can bring your tailstock up and support it while you're cutting the shaping the bottom of the bowl. Just tighten that up, and that will give you quite a lot more support. What I'm going to do, this is the bottom of the bowl. I'm going to start forming that. speed it up a little bit. I know from experience that I need a tendon that is 2 3/4 inches in diameter and about a half inch long. I just want to make a comment about the wood. This box elder's got a lovely red color in it, and sometimes you'll find we'll probably turn most of this away, but it really enhances the look of the turning when it's done. I'll move that up. Straighten this out. If I wanted to, I could leave a larger base on there and use a larger chuck. But for this size bowl, you probably would have a little too big a base. I think we're fairly close to the size we're looking for. Okay, we're 3 inches, so we've got another 1/4 inch to go. You'll notice I'm forming the outside shape of the bowl as I go. I'm just going to straighten this out so that I can hold it in the chuck. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just finish forming the outside shape of the bowl, and then we're going to show you how we sand it prior to turning it around. As I said before, you could sand it later if you want to, but this is probably the easier way. So I'll just clean it up a little bit. I like to keep my chisel sharp. For one thing, with a sharp chisel, there's a whole lot less sanding, and you'll notice that you've got a pretty smooth surface except for a couple of spots. What I normally use is a Velcro sanding disc in a power drill, and I'll just move this aside. Generally you can go in either direction, but I choose to go in reverse right now because there's less stuff kicking up at me. And I would simply slow down the speed a little bit so you don't get the wood too hot, and I will simply turn off. You can see the sawdust coming off it. Speed it up. I just want to show you how quickly it cleans up the surface. Now, we're not going to finish sanding this, but using different grits, I started with a 60, I would go to an 80, and then go to a 100, and then down from there until I have the surface that I really want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the work around. I'll pull that back. Now here again, to release this, you can either take the screw out later on, or you can lock the spindle, and this is what I'm going to do, and then just use both hands, hopefully. Gets pretty tight. There we go. I have turned pieces of wood that were probably 20 pounds in weight on a wormwood screw, and as long as the wood is dry, it'll hold very well. So I'll take that off. Release the spindle again. Take this off. Now some people prefer to use a Forster bit and drill a cavity in the back of the block, put it inside, insert the jaws in there and expand them out. And that works pretty well. But in the end, you always have to contend with getting rid of that cavity if you want the work to look really good. I'm going to use a bowl gouge for hollowing out the center of this. Now there's different things you can do. Many turners use what's called a boring bar, which is a bar with different cutters on the end. You can change, and you can support it from a tool rest back here, and you can hollow that out very quickly with it. I'm not using that today, that's the wrong way. But I just want to show you how we would hollow this out. Lower the tool rest a bit. Now this is a standard grind on this gouge. It's pretty much the way it came off the shelf at the store. But I've got another type called the fingernail grind, which is a different kind of a cut. Sometimes it'll take off more wood. You can see that it's a pretty big cutting surface, and it cuts with the side of the tool as well. I think we've got a knot in the center there. No, we haven't, but we've got some pretty wood. I'll just keep on here. Now you could take that out with a scraper the same way that I was doing earlier, and it will work perfectly well. Some people prefer to use a scraper, other people prefer to use a gouge. Now you'll notice that we've got through where the screw was in the wood, so we're going to have a nice clean surface on the bottom. On a bowl this size, I will try to keep the sides fairly consistent, maybe 1/4 of an inch or maybe slightly more, depending on what it looks like in the end. And I tend to undercut the outside and undercut the inside, And the reason for that is it makes the bowl much more grippable when you pick it up. And the people that use these things tell me they like that. So, you can see here probably I'm starting to undercut the rim a bit, and I'll continue to do that, and then I'll do the outside as well. One of the things that I often see on bowls is they'll leave the bottoms too thick and they feel kind of clumsy. So you try to, you want a thicker bottom than you have sides, but generally speaking, there's a happy medium in there, and you'll see it in a minute. If you haven't turned before, it's a good idea to stop once in a while and just check to make sure that you're not going too deep, because you don't want to lose the bowl or end up hitting parts of the chuck. So what you really want is a nice consistent round shape on the bottom. You don't want any rapid changes in that shape. And just undercut that rim a little bit right now. Level off the front of that, if you haven't done yet. I'm going to just check that for, and I pretty much go by feel. Properly done, you'd probably use a gouge to, or a gauge to get the thickness where you want it. I'm going to take a little bit more of that. We're going to be reversing this and holding it in place with a vacuum chuck in a little bit, and so we need a smooth surface. We have to sand the inside so that the seal on the chuck can make a proper contact with the wood to hold it in place. So I'll just finish this off, and then we may do a little bit more shaping on the outside. Okay, next I'm going to take and sand that. And once again, I'll start with a 60 grit, and I'm going to slow it down because that's going a little too fast. It does a very fast job of taking the roughness out. And remember one thing, if you have a vacuum chuck, you can always put the thing back on later on and redo it if you want to change the shape a bit or resand it or whatever it is you wish to do. After I've done that with the 60 grit, I'll change over to a 80 grit. It's a matter really of working your way up in the sandpaper world. Now, there's nothing stopping you from sanding that with a piece of sandpaper in a traditional way. If this was a piece of paper, you can sand it just like this, no problem. It won't hurt you, it works just as well, it's not as fast. And sometimes, as I said before, you get a reverse sanding will actually work faster with some wood. Just depends on the grain orientation, I think, as much as anything. But I'm going to go back to regular. And I'll just finish this with I won't finish it, I'll just sand it down to a reasonable, I'll take a 100 grit next. We're going to sand this outside before we turn it over. I want to show you how to mount this on a vacuum chuck in a way that it will be perfectly centered. This is a 3.5 inch vacuum chuck. It has a neoprene seal on the front of it. I'll just thread it onto there. Now when I pull that ahead, that will be perfectly centered. I'll turn it on. Got a small vacuum pump there. And you can see the vacuum coming up. However, this wood is porous, I can see that, and it's letting air through it. And we're going to have to probably modify our normal procedure here. So I cannot safely remove that and hold that on that chuck.
Dave, you know what? I like the fact that this didn't work out for us, because you know what? That is that just happens to be the way things sometimes go. Like, it doesn't always go perfect, and a lot of times in these videos that people see and stuff like that, it just goes perfect. Now, how many takes they did, I don't know, but do you have
well, it puts me in mind of something that happened to me many years ago. I was working at the University of Saskatchewan, taking a course in animal science, and I spent 3 months doing statistical analysis on a particular research project. And in the end, we found out that our research had failed, our process had failed.
3 months in?
3 months in.
Yeah.
So I was feeling really dejected about this when my prof called me in and he said, look, I want to tell you something. It's probably more important to know it didn't work than to have a result that was good. At least we know now what not to do. And it's like this in wood turning as well.
Yeah.
Next time, take a look at if the wood is cracked, don't use it. Or seal the cracks properly. I could seal that crack with cyano glue and still finish it, but I couldn't do it on the spot.
Yeah. My dad says he's so good at his job because he's had so much time to screw up, so he knows now what not to do.
Well,
so
we're imperfect wood turners turning imperfect wood in an imperfect world, so have fun. It's a wonderful pastime. It's a wonderful hobby.
So we're gonna link the tools we use in the description below. If you're stopping by for the first time and haven't already and would like to, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you back in the shop soon.